it is, you know, and that contempt continues spreading to how we approach our immigration. For instance, in Kenya, any foreigner can land in JKIA and get a visa on arrival. But us, we go to the US Embassy, you are queued there. They make us go through hoops. They take our application fees. They don't even refund. Which is why I was saying the other place we should be occupying is occupying US Embassy. Because how do they charge $200 for an application? Well, they already have a quota where they know we are going to allow these ones. They already have a quota. So today they say we are only allowing 20 or 30. So everyone there, you are just going as a formality because they have pre-decided and predetermined who is going to get a visa and who is not going to. And then we have seen this Meg Whitman. She has insinuated herself so much in our policy making. She's taking selfies. She's doing a lot of PDA with Ruto. And I'm saying, who the fuck does she think she is? She's just a mere diplomat brought here to serve a purpose. She's supposed to be neutral. She is not even hiding that she's pro this faction of the political divide. She doesn't care about Kenyans. She's here serving commercial interests. And we as Kenyans are supposed to clap for her because Ruto held an umbrella for her. That is the highest form of contempt. We are here because of colonialism. These are the offshoots of colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, and we still find ourselves in the age of the Aquarius. We are still complying with such nonsensical PR stunts. So if we are saying occupy everywhere, we also include occupy US Embassy because number one, they have enabled this rogue regime. They have facilitated all these things you're seeing, the murders and the genocide and the massacres in Githurai and Rongai. But over and above that, they have implemented, because we have a weak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have implemented some immigration policy where Kenyans are made to feel as if we are going to beg for visas. You should make those decisions earlier so that if you're not going to give somebody a visa, you're going to refund 75% of the educational of the applicational fees, and I think everyone, we are on board with that. I'm going to touch on something about education. We are where we are because number one of our media is very toxic. You have seen how they tried to suppress the numbers of the people in Kware, in Mukuru kwa Jenga. They were lying blatantly. Linus Kaikai, shame on you if you're listening. You're full of shit, you journalists. Journalists should not be allowed anywhere where we are doing our protests or doing our activities. Because if you're going to get the real information from the people and then you go and alter it because you've been paid by State House, then we should not allow you to be there. So journalists are one part of the problem. Number two, we have religion. And number three, we have the educational curriculum. We've been talking about something called the quota system. I've been speaking about it severally. So during the Moi era, they came up, and during 844, they came up with something called the quota system, where now they select, it's almost like they sieve, it's almost like they cherry pick the best brains, which will go to some certain schools which have better facilities than the others. But if you look, and Jimmy was talking about the amount of money that has, we've been expending in the name of debt. We've been collecting. Now this year they've collected 2 trillion in taxes. They are going to borrow another probably 2 to 3 trillion in in loans. But we are not seeing anything on the ground. The counties are not building anything. So the quota system, and there is this misconception that the government built Alliance School or the government built Mangu High School. No, the schools were started and they were donated by colonialists. They were donated by the colonialists because they had grabbed our land. Now they wanted to make some concessions to hoodwink the people who are stupid by then, to be hoodwinked with a church. It was always the Holy Trinity. So there was always a church, a school, and a hospital. So they hoodwink you with that. They give you that trilogy. And so the land was what was donated, and then they mostly donated it to the church. But the parents who took their children there were always charged a development fee, and that development fee was in every fee structure, and that is what was used to build the schools. Over and above that, there used to be harambes. So there is nobody who can claim that the government government has ever built any school. But why do we find should have gone to build schools instead, so that instead of there's this saying that the closest school is the best school. So instead of having a boarding school where some leaving Chavakali coming back to Nairobi, why are we subjecting students by the political class until I saw the actual number? Pay more emphasis. First of all, we expunge religion from percent of our graduates, all of them aspiring to do business administration or to do what? No, we have artists, we have musicians, we have agronomists, we have everything. We have even vocational training. Now there is a shortage of, you get somebody to be an electrician for you. They are meeting you with a lot of shoddy work because they haven't perfected the art, and it has to start not just in high school, but in primary school. But we've been bogging kids to do a lot of homework, carry big bags, waking them up, I don't know, at 5 a.m. to go to school. That is to learn important subjects which will not even be relevant in their careers in the future, while they should start. If somebody is good in sports, if somebody is good in music, if somebody is good in being an electrician or whatnot, they should start in primary school so that they start perfecting the craft earlier in life. So that is one of the and then the church has captured, especially our politicians, because our politicians now love masses when they go and address masses, and then it comes on TV, and then they feel they stroke their bloated egos after saying absolutely nothing. So the church can be there, as an oversight. And then religion should be a mandatory undertaking in every school. If a kid feels they are Christian, nobody should block them. If there's a Muslim, there should be all those facilities in every school. But they should not be driving policy. They should not be herding students to their mental impotence. We have seen the position they have taken in our political dynamics today. We don't trust them. We no longer listen to them, because they have shown us that given an opportunity, they will be always inclined to identifying and gravitating towards thugs and thieves like William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua and whatnot. So we remove them from the educational establishment, and let's start investing in our youth so that... Okay. Amerix, how much longer? How much longer?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So we expunged religion from the curriculum, because this CBC was an imposition of Fred Matiang'i and Uhuru and God knows who else. We don't know whether there was public participation, but even if there was, we have come to understand that public participation in Kenya is a formality. It's just done, for the cameras. But now let's be intentional. And even as we are talking about overhauling the political and economic structure, let every sector contribute in a way. You already know the challenges that affect you in your, whether it's in industry, whether it's in agriculture, so that we have one harmonized document to overhaul our economic blueprint, so that we build a new one, we anchor it to the constitution, so that in future, one president cannot wake up and say, oh, because I hate Jimmy Wanjigi, I used to love him, he's my friend, let me go rock up to his house and raid him when his family is there. We don't want to see such scenes again, and they will only be a figment of our imagination. They will only be a distant past if our reforms are intentional, if they are deliberate, and if they are forthright, and if we are all committed to the same particular process. Thank you very much, Amerix, for having me.
Thank you very much, Francis. Let me go back to Jimmy. Jimmy, can we continue with the discussion again about the debt? You were talking about the four levels of debt in this country.
Yes, Amerix, I'm glad to be back. I was saying that we have what you call 4 pockets of debt. And the 4 pockets are described this way. The Paris Club pocket. This Paris Club pocket is the pocket that has the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and a lot of the Western bilateral agreements. We have another, which is called the London Club debt. The London Club debt is where you have Euro bond, and you have syndicated loans. Very expensive debt. Then you have the Chinese debt. Some of it, most of it, very kosher, but there's been some malfeasance, which I'll explain shortly. It's very soft, but I'll tell you of something that was glaringly a big fraud on Kenyans. And the last pocket is what you call domestic debt. Now, remember what I said earlier, that in what is called the medium to long term, our law is very clear. You can only borrow for development. Only borrow for development. So you'll find in the bilateral, what you call the Paris Club debt, the bilateral ones, you'll find them on the budget. You'll find line items. For example, USAID is funding a bridge in Lamu, for example. Or British aid is funding something in education. Or there is a road being built by the Italians, and it's on the budget. It is always in what you call the appropriations bill. The appropriations bill is basically the budget according to our laws. Now, you'll find that. You'll find there is support for IMF and World Bank in the budget. It is there. Some budget is about going to line items, what are called vote items in the budget. Some of this IMF money I'll come to later, we are questioning what it's about because it is not in the budget. Now, you come to what you call this new pocket that was introduced over the last 10 years or so, called the London Club Pocket. Kibaki took a small portion of it as he was exiting, but it was really perpetuated under this regime of Uhuru Ruto. That pocket of London Club is very expensive commercial money, more or less commercial money. It comes from private investors. Eurobond comes from private investors looking for where they can put their money, right, and earn a good interest rate. So the interest rate was taken for our first Eurobond of Trubin was about 6 or 7%, but it has gone up. Now, Eurobonds that the Uhuru Ruto government took was 7 billion. They've also taken a similar amount under syndicated loans, 7 billion. And I can tell you today that none of that money, because it is long term, it is beyond 1 year, none of that money, you're talking about $15 billion, appears anywhere in our budget. It funds not one project. It does not even, we don't even have it as appearing in the consolidated fund. It does not fund one item on the budget. That is your London Club Pocket, and it is very expensive. Then you have the Chinese debt. The Chinese debt, most of it is anchored in our budget. It is very clearly stipulated what projects they're supporting. Right? If we are doing a road, if we are doing SGR, it has been there. But SGR has been a fraud of monumental proportions. And I'll simply put it this way just to give you an example. Just to give you an example. I'm very familiar with this project called SGR. Very familiar. I initiated that project under the Kibaki regime. In fact, it was under the coalition agreement of Kibaki and Raila. We started that project in 2008, and that project was simply a private project. It had no government money. We wanted to do a private feasibility study because a company called RVR had failed. And we wanted to do private investment of a line from Mombasa all the way to Malaba. Right? Simply a private investment, no taxpayers' money. Our costing out of our feasibility study and our technical study came to 55 billion shillings, all the way from Mombasa to Malaba. I suddenly saw an amount of just Mombasa to Nairobi, somebody parachuting a project that had become government under the Uhuru Ruto government of 380 billion, just Mombasa to Nairobi. That project from Mombasa to Naivasha costed for what were called the original construction plus rolling stock amounted to 500 billion shillings. So just to give you a summary. So the cost of the project is 500 billion. Chinese Exim Bank, that's the Chinese debt, say we are going to loan the Kenya government a total of 90% of that money. So Kenyans, you must raise 10%. 10% of 500 is 50 billion shillings. So us from our hard-earned taxes must pay 10% before they pay the 90%. So we did an audit of these amounts. It's part of our debt audit. We did an audit. What happened? Did the Chinese give us all the money that they said? Yes, they did. They gave all the money. It was paid directly to China Road and Bridge Company, the 90%. So did Kenyans raise the 50 billion, which was 10% of 500, right? And did they contribute their share of 10%? We did the sums. Now, on the loan part, I want you to remember we are servicing that loan at very expensive rates. In fact, this coming month, there's a big bill coming up. Now, did we raise the 50 billion to as our contribution of 10%? So we did the numbers, right? And it's called Self-Raising Finance, SGR grant from the Treasury. So 50 billion was supposed to move from Treasury to Kenya Railways and then to the contractor called China Road and Bridge. So we just did the math. Eric, it was not 50 billion that was paid. It was 644 billion shillings that came out of the treasury to go to Kenya Railways, to then go to China Road and Bridge as self-raising finance for a project worth 500 billion. So we paid for it with our own money and even more. And yet we took a loan and we are paying back that loan. China Road and Bridge for the building of SGR from Mombasa to Naivasha was paid a total of almost 1.2 trillion for a project of 500 billion, according to the contract documents. So 700 billion above what was required. That is a frightening fact. Then you come to something called domestic debt. What you hear, bonds and bills taken from our local banks, insurance companies, pension funds. This amount of the total debt we're talking about, almost 11 trillion, today stands at 5.1 trillion. 800 from our pension funds, 700 from insurance companies, the rest from banks. In other words, it's our deposits, the Kenyans' deposits in our banks, that the banks have decided to take to the treasury, loan to the treasury, and then our taxes pay them their huge interest rates. So you can see where you see some bank CEOs earning humongous amounts of bonuses and all sorts of amounts like 400 million shillings a year. This is why our money going to our government and our taxes paying for all these banks to make humongous profits at our expense. You and I try and borrow, we are told to borrow at 25%. They are loaning to the government at 16%. It is a monumental fraud because, again, there is nowhere in our appropriations bills revenue that you can say this money. Look at bonds. The other day they took an infrastructure bond of 200 and something billion shillings. I think it was February. What infrastructure on the budget was being funded? Nothing. Nothing. These bonds and bills have funded nothing in our budget. And yet, do you know how much interest we have paid for 5.1 trillion over 10 years? We have paid them a total of 2.7 trillion in interest payments. This is criminality beyond your imagination. And there are some key banks here that have perpetuated this fraud. KCB, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank. Those are three banks that have perpetuated a very clear fraud on the Kenyan public, us as depositors, and us as taxpayers, and made humongous profits, become oligarchs against the sovereign, against us. And we must start saying we are not going to take this rubbish anymore. And this rubbish goes this way. If you have deposits in those banks, if your parents have deposits in those banks, we should pull them out tomorrow, not today, not yesterday, not the day after, tomorrow, if not today. Remove that money. Take it to banks that are not defrauding us, because what is happening there is a fraud of the highest proportions. I want to go back to the London Club debts. These bonds, Eurobonds, these syndicated bonds, these syndicated loans, none of those appear on the budget. But one underlying fact you will find is that somewhere along the way, like you saw recently with the latest payments of Eurobond, the last payment of Eurobond was paid 500 so-called billion balance, right, of the 2 billion we had borrowed. That was paid by World Bank, IMF. Why are they underwriting money that never came to us? Who is this that they are backing? So here they are. They encourage us to take those very expensive loans, knowing full well they are not on a budget. And then when we can't pay, IMF comes up and it starts rattling. Oh, we can save you, but these are the conditions. And the conditions become a matter of they become a matter of our slavery. Now, all this information I'm giving is in the public domain. Our forensic audit is in the public domain. We got it from public documents. We are not trying to create new documentation. And we've been speaking this for the last 2 years. Kenyans need to understand categorically that we are in a mode of slavery. And I'll perpetuate this slavery by going back to the point where we were saying today 80% of our tax revenue is going to one item called debt. These debts I'm talking about, and which we have already paid for, don't owe, but we are going to keep being made to pay unless we cut off this chain because it is illegal. We do not owe it. This coming financial year, 2024-2025, the estimate from the Treasury of debt payments, keeping the current exchange rate, is 1.853164. In other words, 1.853 trillion shillings is going towards the debt payments this financial year of 2024-2025. You come to the year 2025-2026, it is 2.2 trillion to be paid to debt payments. You go to the next year, 2026-2027, is 2.352. And remember, we are getting what you call diminishing returns on our revenue, the Laffer curve, which is the maximum you can squeeze out of us. There is no item in our budget that is taking so much money. People are complaining about confidential funds of 700 million shillings. Look at this year. You tell me which item is taking over 1.8 trillion, one single item in debt payments, in any payment. Nothing is doing that. Nothing at all. This is the tragedy that we are living in. We are in slavery. And we are in such slavery that William Ruto is soon going to come and tell us that he can no longer pay it. And that we have been unable to pay it because, you people rejected the finance bill. Now I cannot raise revenue. So now I have to default on this payment. And the default means that they now start coming to your accounts. They start looking for your deposits. And they start telling you that you've got to take a share of this. Otherwise, the banks will close. And we're going to have serious problems here. Ghana went through this. And Ghana are suffering today. They are suffering from 2022 December, where 70%, 70 shillings of every 100 went to debt. They are suffering. And I can tell you, it is so tragic because you go back to the London Club debts. You go back to these so-called Mzungus guy that he's talking about, these criminals that have perpetuated this fraud even in places like Malaysia and gotten caught. These big firms called JP Morgan Chase, they have been part of a conspiracy because if you are going to loan anybody money, the first thing you must do is your due diligence. What are you giving this money for? Is it in line with the laws of Kenya? Which project is being funded? The Euro bond that was taken in 2013. Our investigation is very clear on this. It started an investigation all the way back in 2014, when I can tell you here on this show, a man called Jacob Juma, the late, he was my friend, came to visit me. And he tells me, Jimmy, I can tell you there's something fishy going on here. And you know all he had? He was just simply reading what are called the National Treasury quarterly reports. That is all. And he said, the president stood up when he said he's taking the Eurobond. And he said, because he's taking the Eurobond, they are not going to borrow domestically. The estimate at the time was about 300 billion shillings. So 3 billion almost Eurobond that he was taking. But when I look at the quarterly reports from the National Treasury, it seems they still borrow domestically from the local banks. And that's their quarterly report, not the budget, quarterly report. And they are not recording what happened to the Eurobond. So we started asking some questions. Unfortunately, we got the opposition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga at the time, to write a letter to the Treasury to ask where are these euro bonds? The 2 billion you say you borrowed, what has happened to it? On a bit of a scare for the then Minister of Finance called Rotich, he released documentation. And he showed the following, that $1 billion, they went out into the market and they managed to get $2 billion early 2014. In fact, by May 2014. And that $2 billion, they showed us what is called the expenditure pattern of those dollars. So they said one of the first 1 billion, $650 million of that money went to pay a syndicated loan of Mwai Kibaki directly to a bank called Barclays Bank. In fact, Standard Chartered, sorry. And they showed us a SWIFT transfer of that amount. Then a SWIFT transfer is to show, like you get an RTGS that shows from point A to point B, it went to the account and was credited. Then they showed us that 350 balance of that first $1 billion, it went directly to the consolidated fund, exchequer account 00010,03987. And they showed us very clearly that account. 350 credited. We said, hallelujah, asante sana. Very good work. Then we said, where's the second one? They said, oh, the second one, we hung on to until September of that year. We don't know why they asked JP Morgan Chase to hang on to that. But they said it also came. We said, show us, like you showed us of the 350, show us this amount of 1 billion, how it came to the Treasury. Said, because the 350 that came to the Treasury, came to the central bank, account number 1, it showed categorically that you had a SWIFT transfer. You even had your letters from CBK addressed to the Treasury showing the exchange rate confirmation that you transferred to Kenya shillings. Show us the same for this $1 billion in September. They sent and put up a SWIFT transfer. But that SWIFT transfer did not show us where that money went. It was completely blackened out. Apart from the top where you see it leaving an account at JP Morgan Chase, the rest was completely blackened out. Then they tried to quickly show us an amount in December that was directly from Citibank, what they called tap sales of $815 billion, right? That $815 billion, they showed us the SWIFT transfer. It came to an account they had now created in the central bank called a sovereign wealth account, some 10,12674 account, not the consolidated fund. We said, And then they showed us the communication from the same central bank saying we have credited this amount with an exchange rate of this value. We said, very good. Can you go back to the one of September? Where is it? They never, ever showed us. We eventually saw it in the Auditor General's special audit of the Eurobond done by Edward Auko. And Edward Auko in his report says that this amount entered an account called 8,214 something. We said, what account is this? We don't know it. We don't know it at all. What is this account? We never got a further explanation. But nobody dared to present even one iota of that SWIFT transfer like they had done for the others. Even the letter exchanging the amount from dollars to Kenya shillings, central bank saying this is the exchange value amount, they didn't show us. What we know is that that money, nobody has provided evidence that it entered this country. Now, the Auditor General in his report further goes to say that all these amounts cannot be attached to not even one project. And actually, even in his conclusion, says that when he asked the Treasury, what were these monies so-called used for? The Treasury says that these funds are fungible. In other words, they're interchangeable. they can do what they want with them. In other words, they admitted they are breaking the law. That is just one Eurobond of $2 billion. One did not come here. They subsequently took another 5. Please take note. They subsequently took another 7 in syndicated loans. We cannot find anywhere in our budget and in our books. Now, Kenyans, are we going to continually accept that we are going to become slaves and have agreed to become slaves? Because this is what is called modern day slavery. Now, and for generations to come, the perpetuating our poverty and our slavery. In the old days, slavery was something that was done with chains put to our hands and our feet. That is what is happening here with this debt. Debt has now been used by our own oligarchs, our own people in power, and of course, in collaboration with others outside this land. Others outside this land who know what is going on, who know the illegalities of what has been perpetuated, to ensure that we are slaves to them in perpetuity. You can complain about the finance bill today or tomorrow, which are tax raising measures, but we are going down so fast as a nation. The poverty rates are increasing by the day because of one item. Anything that is collected from us is going to others, and it never came to our use. And it's going in such large amounts. It is strangling us. It is finishing us for generations to come. And my proposal has been very clear. What is not in our laws, what does not exist in our constitution, is not liable to the sovereign. We are not and should not pay it. We must cut this chain off our neck. We must remove it. And those who put us in this mess must pay the ultimate price of justice for the people of Kenya because they have caused havoc to our lives. We have said continually that this regime will not change it because it was part and parcel of doing what we are suffering. They are not going to hang themselves. So William Ruto should not pretend that he can set up a task force to come and whitewash what he knows he's capable to. He is not going to tell us that we will not accept. This is a fraud of monumental proportions. We are unlike other countries that have had to shut down because of debt. Ours, we do not have. And I can tell you with all the sums we have paid, my fellow Kenyans, we do not owe any debt to anybody. We do not. In fact, if we remove that debt from our books, I can tell you have a reduction of taxation and you'll have money in your pockets like you've never seen before. But people are hostage to their own creations. And we must reach a stage now where we say we are going to cut off. We are not going to be anybody's slaves. And we must cut this link. And those who are perpetuating it must face justice. And those foreigners who have been part of this, who have been perpetuating this, who know what they are doing to our demise as a country, we will also follow you. We will look for you. You are criminals. You have aided criminality. In Malaysia, you were found. In Mozambique, you were found. You shall be found even in Kenya. And those who are protecting them, please. We used to have big friends. The West have been good friends of Kenya in the past. Why do you want us to be your slaves? We are just as good, if not better than you. We deserve more, and we are not going to take this nonsense anymore. So, my fellow Kenyans, we start with our own. Those who are perpetuating our slavery in something called domestic debt, those culprits, those oligarchs, must be dealt with now. Tomorrow, the day after that, go take your money from those banks. Tell them they are not at liberty to continue your slavery. Tell those banks that decide they are going to put money in bonds and bills to our detriment, bonds and bills, money that does not enter the consolidated fund, money that is going to buy bullets to kill our children, that we cannot account for. We are not going to agree anymore. Stop them and tell them that you are going to go and greet them if they perpetuate this mentality. But now that they have done it and they have sunk us, take your money back. Tell them you are going to put to enterprises and banks that are not perpetuating your slavery. Let us start at home and we shall deal with the rest one after the other. Asanteni sana, Eric.
All right. Oh, 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 oh. My goodness. So you, Jimmy, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So you, what have you done, or what are you doing in your position? Because I know you are capable. You have the means. What are you doing in your position to ensure that justice on this economic fraud is given to Kenyans? Because Kenyans right now are unable to put money in their pockets.
That's correct.
Bad.
That's correct, Amerix. And I can tell you, they will not be able to. As long as we have this monster, they will not. So the first thing is that we must get rid of these people from power. Anybody that has aided and abated this must get out of power. We must have a fresh broom. They must be removed from power because they will never accept to cut off this chain. They were part of creating it. So we must get power. That is number one. And this revolution, I want to congratulate this revolution. This is the only way. I want to congratulate those who are doing it. I want to say categorically here, I condole with the soldiers, the fallen soldiers of this revolution. And you shall one day receive commendations from a government that understands that you are heroes of this republic. We must cut off this chain, and it comes by cutting off these people in power. They must exit power. That is number one. In our own way, we have educated people. There are people who are taking up cases in courts abroad, because there's no point of trying to do it here. We have seen our courts do amazing things that you wonder what law they follow. There are people who are taking up cases in Paris and in London, right, for various aspects of this debt. Human rights lawyers who are doing so out of their own volition pro bono. But this is not about one or two issues, items. It is not about others saving us. It is not about just Jimmy Wanjigi. It is about us collectively saying it is to our demise to continue this. It must be all of us saying we are not going to agree. We are not going to agree that our children were born to be slaves and their children to be even worse slaves than they were. We must say no, and we must collectively come together and agree that that can only come with a dynamic shift that we are seeing today. This is a moment that is earth-shaking for this republic. We use it and do it properly. We will never be chained. We will see greatness in this nation, and you'll see us stretch this wave beyond the borders of this land. And you shall see somebody called the Great Kenyan that will be more dominant than you're seeing those Western nations. But we must get rid of this chain. This is our chain. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter which way you move, if you do not remove this chain, we are done. There's no other solution. You can talk about all other things you want to talk, but I can tell you, if you do not remove this chain, we are moving nowhere. And anybody telling you they can perform will not perform if they're not talking about removing this chain. All there is balderdash, it is lies. You have to remove this chain. And we do not own it. We do not have it. It is actually illegal. So we are educating, Amerix. We are educating. We've taken 2 years. We spent money doing this forensic audit. We are educating. We are talking. We keep speaking. When I first started speaking, I remember people saying, but who understands all these figures, all these terminologies? Kenyans are not about the economy. They want to hear us. I said, one day, Kenya will be about issue orientation. issues are going to drive their politics, not tribalism. Issues, their lives, their collective lives as a great Kenyans is going to drive them. So I will keep educating. I will keep informing. And you can write me off all you want, but I'll keep speaking. One day, somebody will hear. Because this pain will not stop. It can only grow. I've given you the figures this financial year, the next financial year, the year after that, and increases even more thereafter. This pain will continue because there's also something else it has set in. There are two twin evils, just to digress a bit in economics. It's called recession and inflation. So at the beginning of the year, everybody was complaining about the high cost of living. Things are very expensive. Then William Ruto says, now prices are down. It is so simple in economic terms. When you have inflation, you just tap liquidity. You tap the market, you remove money from the market. So you raise interest rates. Your banks are told to bring in more money to central bank. So you remove liquidity. But when you remove liquidity, now everybody says they have no money in their pocket. Things are very bad. Goods are there, they're still high. They have no money in their pocket because you create recession. And you fast-paced recession. Recession was always there. In other words, the growth of a nation. You stop it, you stunt it, you start going down. And the only way to solve that problem when you have those two twin devils is to reduce taxation. So you give leeway. This government cannot reduce taxation because 80% of it is going towards an item called debt. And William Ruto is so afraid of debt default because it is even more painful. He's so afraid. He's so afraid of even calling it odious and cutting it off because that means an investigation and he doesn't want to be found and they all don't want to be found. They are so afraid of all the options. So I can tell you, even if today you gave him peace to form his government or a new government or people want to join, I can assure you, you'll be back on the streets. This pain won't stop. They have no solution for your lives. They are wasting your time. In fact, I don't even know why he's still in office. The man should just stand up and say, Mimi nimeshindwa, asanteni sana, let us call a general election. Other people can do this. They have greater ideas than I do to solve this problem, or maybe more guts. This has happened to other people in the world. You get to a stage where you cannot solve the problems. I remember in England the other day, in the UK, you had a prime minister, you had 3 prime ministers in 1 year because they could not solve this problem that had been created out of the liquidity out of COVID in the UK. They literally printed money and they could solve it. Now here you have a situation where, if we are to be honest, and Ruto is to be honest with himself, he cannot solve this problem. No matter what he talks, he cannot solve it because he's too tied in it. Don't waste Kenya's time. There are always other people who can do this. Get out of the way. Exit honorably. Usher us through another general election where now Kenyans are listening to the issue. They're not being cheated by marupurupu and goodies to be given. There's no goodies here. We have a problem to solve because if we solve this problem, our greatness begins. And I say our greatness because it was just interrupted. We were on our way to our greatness, it was interrupted. Our greatness begins. Allow those that the people feel can solve their problem to sit there. You don't have to hang in there. There's nowhere where it says you must have a contract of 5 years.
Hang in there, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
I see my co-host Nyakundi is there. And there is a lady here who was talking about Pan-Africanism and IMF and World Bank. Maybe Nyakundi, can you bring her?
Excuse me. Hello?
Just hold on a minute, Tony. Just a minute.
Tulikuwa taka hawa kubwa kubwa. Tumegonga wangapi? Tumegonga gapi? Wote. Hata Kidiki. Leo rahisi nikekupata kwa kiasi ngekunulia chai.
Yes. Where's that lady? Kadhomi.
Good evening, Eric and the
Yes,
team.
go on.
Yeah, go on. Thank you so much for having me in this space. Just a bit about myself. I have experience in election observation. And lately in 2022, I was a campaign manager. I worked with Azimio, worked with in the side of Mount Kenya with Jubilee Party, and I did a lot of work in these elections, and I have a lot to talk about elections in Kenya because it's something I'm into, and I'm also into governance and public administration as a career. So I know you wanted me to talk about elections. I just go through it like real quick about what exactly happens in our Kenyan election. And I would say the only election that was a people's election in Kenya was 2002, the Kibaki Tosha election. That is the only time that Kenyans were able to get what they voted for. We moved to 2007, where we had the post-election violence, the Kibaki and Raila election. A lot of that election had local manipulation, local players, what people would call, it was a local elite that would manipulate a people's will. That was not a fair election in the country. Even the Electoral Commission then, that was Kivoito then, he died saying that we do not know who won the election. I am saddened because there's no one who has come out to even write a book about the 2007-2008 election, where many Kenyans lost their lives. That was another election that has never been audited. And until today, we do not have a Kenyan election that has been audited. Most of the Kenyan elections are swept under the rugs, and we are made to believe elections have gone in a particular way. And that led to a coalition government after the post-election violence. And of course, the Ruto and Uhuru going to Hague. In 2013, we had the Uhuru and Ruto ticket. Another election that has never been audited. When I say this, we cannot authentically say that this particular individual won an election in Kenya, because there is no election in Kenya from 2007 where we've had servers opened. I will pull this quickly to 2022, the last election. But just to mention on 2013 election, where we had Akombe resigning, we had them Sando Day, we had a lot of things that happened in that election. But Kenyans, we just want to move on quickly and settle down. But all in these elections, it's not a people's election. In 2013, coming down, our elections have been manipulated externally in a big way. Manipulated, it's a long process. It starts from the funding of IEBC. It starts from monitoring the country a couple of years before the election. Programs, they call them civic education, foreign funded, but these are small ways of programming Kenyan elections. And we pull it all the way to 2022, and people have been asking me, Mary, how do you know this? I have been in this field as an observer, and I've been studying a lot and following the money. Most of the money that comes to IEBC from the development partners, UNDP, it's money that is meant to sway the directions of these Kenyan elections. And even to be brief and to go to exactly in the 2022 elections, you saw the Azimio team went to Chatham House, but what the media tells us is, of course, the European Union, the Western world is taking care of their interests. But that's not what happens. That's where they're doing an interview of who is going to be the president of what country. And now speaking about Kenya. And they qualify these people on how easily they can manipulate them and buy them in their history. And unfortunately, the Azimio team has not been very lucky in being the anointed people. So these are the team which is easily manipulated, which can carry an agenda. The Western agenda in Kenya was anointed for this election. So elections in Kenya start from the very end. They know who they want. They start working backwards. And the media plays a big role in this. Propaganda plays a big role in this because narratives are set and then we work backwards to the people. One of the elections, these 2022 elections, and I don't know if one day we will ever be able to audit a Kenyan election, because what we get as leadership in this country is not what Kenyans elected. And I will shock you by telling you, high-level campaign secretariats know where the government is headed to. You must have had, like I come from Mount Kenya. In Mount Kenya, we use Jubilee Party. And members of parliament that are vying, utasikia wakisema serikali inaenda pande gani. It's not everyone who has this information. And for you get the ticket of the side where the government is going. Usually it is not who is popular, it is who has been anointed to be the leader. That's why everyone was scampering for a UDA ticket. All the Jubilee people, they just jumped to this other side and got tickets, actually bought tickets. We just buy these tickets to secure getting another term in parliament. And what I would say, if you study the Cherera for what they were talking about, the results of 2022. But because the country is highly charged, people don't listen to the details. But for example, Kiambu County had an excess of 500,000 votes on one candidate. But people say, you know, these things are very small, they're not going to sway an entire election. Let's not look at them. But those things could sway a whole election. No one has ever looked keenly or talked about Smartmatic and how Kenyan data is diverted and changed. Or a logarithm is set to change or sway the data. That is what happens on Kenyan election. This is not local. This is not something done locally. It is an international manipulation of a Kenyan election. Someone needs to write a document about how we've lost our sovereignty. That's why when our president was sworn into office, he has done everything that's a foreign policy. It's not a Kenyan policy. In the Kibaki administration, we had public participation about GMO. Documents sit in parliament. But what did Ruto do? Immediately he came in, he lifted the ban on GMO. No public participation, nothing discussed in parliament, and GMO was allowed in Kenya. Every single loan that is coming to Kenya right now through IMF and World Bank has a social economic agenda attached to it. We give you this loan, you pass this bill, you pass this bill. That's why right now the agriculture bill has been passed. That's why right now it's a criminal activity to carry out agricultural activities unless you have a diploma in agriculture. Otherwise, you face a jail term or a bail. If anyone is willing, lawyers listening to this, please audit every single bill that has been passed in the Kenyan parliament. It's a foreign agenda. It's not a Kenyan agenda. Social economic structures, like on the 24th of July, there's a case, there are Kenyans agriculturists who have come together who are suing because it's now criminal to share seeds in Kenya. These are legislations that have gone through the parliament. That's why I would say this is the worst government I've ever seen as a Kenyan, because no one cares about the bills they have passed in that parliament. Why is our president jumping as high as the foreign masters want him to jump? Because they played a big role in his presidency. He has no stance to fight for the Kenyan people. That's why he was the best candidate for them. And if anyone feels like my sentiments are not true, tell me one single thing he has done that is good for the Kenyan people. Even this finance bill is all a social economic structure attached to IMF funding. When you study all these things that have happened in this country, you realize the foreign hand in the Kenyan democracy, it is so huge. And I will shock you when I tell you, even on the opposition side, high level, they always know where the presidency is going. I will shock you to tell you, even Raila knew, let me do this thing to maintain my backyard, to maintain the control of half of the country. He has a big following. To control Azimio, to have a big number members of parliament in parliament. But he knew he's not going to ascend to presidency because he sort of lost the willingness to keep fighting, because it's a big monster to fight. When the election is done, he'll quickly be meeting the ambassadors. He'll quickly be meeting the EU commissioners, because the players that be have to manipulate both sides. That's why even now, his AU seat is really attached to these foreign bodies. They just want to balance an equilibrium in Kenya, because we are the products in the market. We are the slaves. They're squeezing every little life out of us as they manipulate a sitting government and manipulate an opposition. And as we sit here, discussions are underway of building a government of sort of national unity. I don't know if they're going to call it coalition. And they think that is going to quell the cry of Kenyans right now. They just want a working situation to continue pushing their social economic agendas, which are not Kenyan, which are not for the good of any Kenyan. And you will see they are going to have cabinet positions next week, and you will see what these people are doing. They are working together. If they were not working together, none of these players is coming out clearly and listening to what Kenyans are saying. Because what Kenyans are saying, this government is not fighting for us. Even on the smallest level, this government is not fighting for Kenyans. For the people that can study and do this, if you study the Venezuelan hand in the Kenyan government, it was huge. The foreigners played a big role in diverting the will of the people. And I will tell you again and again, what you see today is not what Kenyans voted. Thank you, Eric, for your time.
Oh, what do you mean?
My Lord, I wonder. I wonder.
What I'm going to teach you in.
So, Cyprian, go on. I can't take this.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Allow me to bring in Mr. Tony Gashoka into the broadcast. So kindly, you can proceed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? This is an important subject because it's dealing with economic pain. Economic pain is actually the whole purpose of any government. And unfortunately for ourselves right now, the government is not being held to account. When the framers of the 2010 Constitution put it together, under Article 4, which declared Kenya to be a republic, there was the provision that Kenya is a sovereign republic under Part 1, but under Part 2, the Republic of Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state founded on national values and the principles of government that follow Article 10. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because the only way in which a democratic republic can function is when the government of the day is held to account by the people of the country. Hello? Am I being heard?
Yes. Go on. We can hear you.
And I want to bring this alarm because Jimmy Wanjigi was speaking competently about what the executives have been doing wrong. And he was talking about the need for us, the people, to hold that government to account. But the only reason that we are being asked to hold the government to account is because of the failure, complete failure of the opposition. And therefore, we cannot have any discussion about progress in Kenya with only Ruto must go. There must include the removal of this parliament and this Senate. Because the President Ruto, when he came into office, his first act was to buy political parties. All of you saw how quickly he moved to do that. And where he could not buy the parties, he bought individual members of parliament. Under our constitution, which is modeled under the Westminster model, the opposition is meant to be an official opposition with equal power to a government so that they can oppose the government of the day in order that the people can get a better government. And the public finances in the consolidated fund are meant to fund that opposition equally as they fund a cabinet and as they fund the presidency, so that at any point the country is having a mirror. Our country is having a dual view, dual highway as to what is happening in the country. And since we allowed Ruto to raid the opposition benches and to actually assume the majority leader in parliament, when actually Azimio won the majority of members in parliament, then nobody is holding Ruto to account. Traditionally, the watchdogs in parliament, the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the Public Investment Committee are chaired by the opposition. And the constitution under the Westminster model envisaged that a government cannot police itself. It must be policed by the opposition. And the Attorney General and the Auditor General and all the heads of any corporation or ministry were required to go to either committee for scrutiny, the same way they would have to go if the president was to summon them. And these are the reports, for example, that came during the Goldenberg scandal, during the Moi time, during the Kibaki time, the agro-leasing scandal, and so forth. But now what you have is the executive in full control of parliament, in full control of the executive, and therefore there is no accountability. And the citizens, as Jimmy is saying, we need to educate people, but the level at which we are educating the people means they don't have the access to government records. And unless Jimmy had put the kind of money he did to get the forensic audit, it was not possible. Yet the Constitution provides that we, the people, fund the opposition, and they have access to government records, have got access to everything so that they can give us this information. So as a people, we should never have reached this position if parliament and if the opposition was doing its work. Why do I raise this issue? I raise this issue because the Jay-Z revolution of 2024 is very different from the revolutions we had run before against Moi and against the second liberation, let's say. And the reason it is different, they started with the no finance bill by occupying parliament and naming the MPs, tukaende tukasalimie hawa ma MPs. Then what happened is there was equal fear on government MPs as there was on opposition MPs. And it was the panic of those members of parliament because of this revolution strategy that jilted Ruto to say he will not sign the finance bill. It's because MPs went to him and told him we are finished. If we do this, we are gone, and these people will throw us out. So I want to say that I think if we look at the way forward, we must of all right now start being very, very critical of the people we are calling were heroes of yesterday. My friend Raila Odinga, who Jimmy and I know well, I want to warn him in this forum, and I want to tell him openly, if you become the man that goes to save Zakayo, you will not only be abdicating your responsibility as an opposition leader, but you will be killing the democratic state that was envisaged by our founding fathers. And this will be a legacy even Jaramogi will not forgive you for. Because the whole idea of fighting for Section 2A under the Moi regime was that we have a multi-party state where opposition parties would hold the government of the day to account. This way we are proceeding is making our citizens go and elect us in elections, which is their duty, and then tell them to manage the executive, to hold it to account and to remove it when they have also elected opposition MPs to do that on their behalf. So I wanted today to change this conversation to say that as we go to the streets from the 16th of this month, we go with two pieces of agenda. That even if Ruto was to go home, but we elect this kind of MPs, we are going to go nowhere. I want to give two examples. The MP for Cilicia, John Waluke, was convicted by a competent court of his peers to 67 years in jail for stealing 1 billion shillings from the National Cereal and Produce Board. Waluke was told in the alternative of his death sentence, he will have to pay back the 1 billion shillings. Not only was Waluke released on an appeal, he participated in an election, was re-elected to parliament against Chapter 10 of the Leadership Act, but he's still an MP, was elected under an opposition ticket, but now is working with William Ruto. So what are the Kenyan people being treated to? We are being treated to musical chairs of these people who have been corrupted in the system. So it doesn't matter if they're in the opposition or in the government, they are all in one boat. And this is why we must sound this alarm. Because if the MCAs in Eldoret or where that young lady was coming from, I could hear her pain of this Finland money. If all the MCAs of the opposition had taken her clarion call, I can tell you that money would have been paid back by the county. But because the executive is not doing it and the opposition is not doing it, this young girl becomes the advocate of the grandfathers and grandmothers of that area of Kenya. So today I want to say this, and I really hope that Raila Odinga's friends are on this line. Because before this, the only critic of Raila Odinga was Meguna. And I found sometimes he could be excessive in his language. But I want to tell Odinga, after working with him for several years, Kenya is at crossroads. And this particular time, I know you're having resistance from other leaders of Azimio who are not boarding on this idea of a cabinet reshuffle or an idea of some kind of dialogue. I want to tell this country why the court rejected BBI. BBI was rejected by 5 judges of the High Court because they said that this was driven by the president and Raila Odinga. It was not driven by the public. It was not people-driven. And because it was not people-driven, the judges, Judge Ogunda, Judge Ngugi, Judge Nyaga, and Matheka, and all of them said that the only way to alter the constitution is to involve the people and get them to begin their agenda. Now, when you say you're going to have a dialogue, and you're calling it a public dialogue, but you're not involving the people, you are saying it as Raila. You are going to do to us again what you tried to do to BBI. Because the people who are marching and who started this agenda asked you to stay at home. Why are you leaving the house? Stay where they asked you to stay. If they want dialogue, they will ask for it. If they want to talk to Ruto, they'll ask for it. Why are you intervening in a constitutional moment where the people are only acting because the opposition is not acting? So as Jimmy is saying, if these matters had just also had more people giving Jimmy some space, if there were more leaders in the opposition, if there were more people adding voice and adding firewood to this fire, this issue of economic rape and economic destruction of Kenya would have reached all of us sooner before we get from the frying pan to the fire. Why am I raising these things? I'm raising these things because I was a press officer or press head of ODM in 2007 and working for Raila Odinga. And that time, I remember that when there was post-election violence in Kenya, Anyang' Nyong'o, who was Secretary General of ODM, wrote a letter to The Hague, to the prosecutor, and said, as ODM, we would like to bring information of crimes against humanity that were done in this country. and they named William Ruto as one of the offenders, according to the violations that could amount to human rights. And following the letter of ODM, William Ruto was charged with 3 crimes of forcible eviction of population and so forth under the Charter of Human Rights. And the same Raila today is telling us that this thing he saw on the streets where 41 people were killed, when he was leading demonstration, 70 somebody people were killed. He's okay with it now that he can talk to Ruto for some dialogue to form some government of national unity. Then I have a duty to call out who was my former friend and say, as much as we are fighting Ruto, we must fight you. Because if you are going to take the country back every time we move forward, this generation cannot inherit our mistakes, because we have allowed this to continue to be the modus operandi. We go forward and deals are made from IPPG, a settlement, political settlement. We go back, government of national unity. We go back, we go to NADCO. From the day we went to NADCO, what one thing has been implemented in NADCO? People told me the other day there is an electoral commission. That electoral commission, who will appoint those people who will go to appoint commissioners? It will be a meeting between Raila Odinga and William Ruto. And if Odinga remains compromised as he is, how do you think we'll have a people's electoral commission? And that is why this nation, this country at this time, must do everything possible to constitute a public constituent assembly, form a transitional authority, and take power. And I want to say, if we do not do that, then these generations and those people who died will repeat the mistakes of their fathers. We are going to go back to a talking shop. We are going to go back to political settlements. Raila will be the chairman of the African Union. His daughter will be the head of somewhere in Yala, and Kalon, and whoever else will be where. I just want you and this country to understand the dangers we are in. The dangers that we have are not tied to the executive. They are tied to abuse of the 2010 Constitution. As I finalize, I wanted to say that under the 2010 Constitution, Chapter 4 gave the Bill of Rights. And that Bill of Rights, read together with Chapter 1, where the sovereignty is with the people, was put in Bomas of Kenya by very senior people like Yash Guy for a reason. Because they foresaw a situation where the government and the opposition betray the people. So in the 2010 Constitution, and Kenya has one of the most advanced constitutions in the world, they put the Bill of Rights, where the sovereignty ran with the people. And to change that constitution, the executive could not manipulate the opposition to change it. And why the BBI was defeated by the High Court is they said if the executive conspires with the opposition to change the constitution, then the public will be have no defense. And this is a preserve only for the people of Kenya. And therefore, I would like to I want to thank Eric for this opportunity. I didn't want to get deep into the economics because I thought speakers before me have got very clear issues on the public debt and where it is and the problems that we have. And of course, that it's really impossible to solve this problem without either a default or a forgiveness of debt. It is just not possible. So my parting comment is that, ambition without knowledge is like a ship on land. And we may be happy saying Ruto must go, but I fear that if we don't change, not just the people who are in parliament, but the way we vote to a tribeless, active, informed election throughout the country, if we do not reduce the cost of leaders, we have 47 counties when we could have 7. We have a woman leader or woman representative who does nothing. She has no duty in the constituency. She has no duty in the county, paid by the public. We've got so many parliamentarians, I don't know how many hundreds, when we could have just 100. We have a bloated system because we said, if we decentralize resources, governors will be okay. Now we have got 47 centers of corruption. Nairobi County should be a ministry in the government of Kenya because of its enormity. And because it is late in the day, and I know many of these people will have things to say, I just wanted to contribute into this conversation that maybe we should have a bird's eye view, a deeper assessment on protecting the democratic state. And it cannot be protected by the executive alone. It must be protected outside the executive as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gen Z, I'm waiting for my young siblings to come. Where is Kiduze? Kiduze. Is he there? Kiduze? Chwani?
Hello?
Chwani? Yes.
Oh, I mute.
Go on. Please go on. Chwani?
Eric, I'm not sure we have him on the call.
Yeah, he's there. He's there. I'm waiting for him. I've seen him here. Please, can you start, please? You are wasting our time. Can you go on?
Hello.
Go on, please. Yeah, that one is wasting our time. Polo Kimani, go on.
Thank you very much, Master Amerix, for giving me this chance to talk just a little bit. I'm not going to talk much, but whatever I'm going to say, you really need to be keen on what I'm going to say. So here's the thing. As I've received the information that as from today, there was a meeting. There has been a meeting, and what the meeting was about is basically Raila Odinga trying to come again and pretend that he's one of us. He's trying to come and kingpin himself as people love Raila. We used to love him, but now his plan is to come. He pretends ajifanya kona sisi, but then when we now embrace him, he now goes and sells us to the Sugoi merchant once again. What I'm just trying to say is, do not accept that. We must remain leaderless. We must remain focused on our goal. And if in any case anything happens, we must not, our leaders wanted to attack. And also another thing, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but at some point I feel like Sugoi's recklessness and Tamayake, it has really opened us our eyes to discover more things. Things like mining. I've been working on that area for a very jana juzi na juzi ingine. I've been working on that, and I came to realize there's a lot of shit happening in Kenya that most people are not even aware of. Hata zile jet mnaona huyu jamaa ati alienda huko anasema alitumwa na mabesti zake. Kumbe huyu jamaa alienda kutuza huko bana. So I'm not going to talk about that pretty much. I'm planning to kuna files bado na kusanya hapa na pale before I give you
Yes.
a full dossier of what is actually happening, because
Yes.
I've come to understand even there's a part of where the Pandora Papers, this whole thing is it's like a food web, a very big web that is interconnected. Easy conservancies is our nini, a lot of dark things that are happening at the expense of Kenyans are really happening new my tent.
Okay.
So we must our goal at okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to talk much. Maybe there are other people who want to say something more important, but my goal was if Raila is trying to integrate our movement, we must not allow him.
Okay.
He's a sellout.
All right.
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. There was
Eric, can you hear
Mercy
me?
here who talked a lot about fertilizer and I've heard Tony talk about the members of parliament, how they've wasted us. I'm not giving a chance to politicians to speak, but there is this politician who voted no. I think is the only one from Bungoma County. You should tell us why he voted no and why his other colleagues voted yes. You should tell us. Jack Wanami, Bumula. How are you, sir?
Mzuri sana bwana. Eric, habari ya
Yes.
wewe?
Mzuri, go on. We give you 4 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me in this space. I'm Wanami Wamboka, Member of Parliament, Bumula constituency. Voted on DAP ticket Azimio, and of course I voted no for the finance bill for reasons that are clear. That one, William Ruto is taking this country in a different direction. I was a sponsor of the Linturi Oster motion because I believed, and I still believe, Mithika Linturi needs to be in jail. Now, listen, Kenyans, you have a minister, first, who brings in contaminated sugar, which has gone to affect Kenyans. And by the way, you may not realize today, a lot of Kenyans are going to suffer from cancer cases because of the contaminated sugar that got its way to the market of Kenya because we had a fraudulent minister called Mithika Linturi. And Kenyans move on as if nothing happened. Then this guy brings in fertilizer that is contaminated. He moves and because of his issues, he goes and gives a company called MEMS distribution company, of course, belonging to his former brother-in-law, which has never been involved in distribution, manufacturing, or fertilizer in any way. So that MEMS proceeds now to look for real manufacturers and distributors of fertilizer in the name of chaos. These guys ordinarily just fraudulently give Kenyans bad fertilizer. Can you hear me, Eric? Hello? Eric, can you hear me?